The warning lights flashed red across every screen in the Valoran High Council chamber. Admiral Torvax stood at the center of the room, his insectoid body towering over the seated council members. His forearms hung at his sides, and his compound eyes reflected the grim data scrolling across the holographic display. 800 warships, he said, his voice clicking through the translator. We sent 800 warships to Nexa Prime. 187 returned. Silence filled the chamber. The council members represented 12 different species, each one bound together in the Valoran Galactic Empire. For 3,000 years, they had maintained peace across their territory. Now that peace was ending, Councillor Veth, a reptilian elder from the desert world of Kroth, leaned forward in his seat. And the Keth? What are their losses? Torvax's mandibles clicked in what passed for a bitter laugh among his kind. Minimal. Their fleet numbers over 2,000 vessels. We destroyed perhaps 40. Their dreadnoughts alone number 12, and each one carries enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. The holographic display shifted to show the enemy. The Keth were not alive in any traditional sense. They were machines, a collective intelligence that had awakened somewhere in the outer reaches of the galaxy centuries ago. No one knew who built them or why. The Keth themselves did not care about such questions. They had only one purpose: to consume organic civilizations and convert their resources into more Keth. 40 species had fallen to them already. Entire worlds had been stripped bare, their populations processed into raw materials. The Keth did not negotiate. They did not accept surrender. They simply calculated the most efficient path to victory and followed it without mercy or doubt. How long until they reached Valora? Asked Ambassador Lyris. She was a crystalline being, her body composed of living mineral that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. Her voice chimed like bells when she spoke. 30 standard cycles, Torvax answered. Perhaps less if they push their engines. 30 cycles. 1 month to prepare for the end of everything. Lyris rose from her seat and addressed the council. I have sent requests for aid to every neighboring power. The Consortium of Free Worlds. The Merchant Guilds. The silent ones beyond the barrier stars. She paused, and her crystalline form dimmed slightly. All have refused. They believe that fighting the Keth is hopeless. They hope that by staying quiet, they will be consumed last. Cowards, hissed Councillor Veth. They will learn their mistake when the Keth come for them. By then it will be too late, Torvax said. For them and for us. The council erupted into argument. Some demanded that they fight to the last ship. Others suggested evacuation, scattering the population across the galaxy in hopes that some might survive. A few even whispered about surrender, though they knew the Keth would not accept it. In the corner of the chamber, a young analyst named Merix worked quietly at her console. She was the same species as Torvax, though smaller and younger, her carapace still showing the green tint of youth. Her job was to monitor long-range sensors and compile data for the Admiralty. It was boring work most of the time, but today she had found something strange. Admiral, she called out, her voice barely cutting through the noise of the arguing council. Admiral Torvax. Torvax turned toward her, his antennae twitching with irritation. What is it? I found something in the sensor archives. An anomaly near the galactic rim in Sector 774. The rim is empty, Torvax said. There is nothing out there but dead stars and cosmic dust. That is what we have always believed, Merix agreed. But look at these readings. For the past 60 years, our long-range sensors have detected energy signatures from that region. They were classified as stellar phenomena and ignored. But I ran them through a pattern analysis, and they did not match any known natural occurrence. She projected her findings onto the main display. The council members fell silent, staring at the data. There, At the edge of known space, something was generating massive amounts of energy. The patterns suggested industrial activity on a scale that rivaled the Valoran Empire itself. "That is impossible," Lyra said. "We have mapped every civilization within 10,000 light years. There is no one in that region." "Unless they did not want to be found," Merrick's replied. Counselor Veth waved a clawed hand dismissively. "This is fantasy. Even if there were some hidden civilization out there, why would they help us? We have never heard of them, and they have clearly never contacted us. They are probably watching our destruction with amusement. Or they do not know about us," Merrick suggested quietly. Admiral Torvax studied the data for a long moment. His military mind calculated distances, travel times, and probabilities. Even if there was a civilization in Sector 774, reaching them would take weeks. Convincing them to help would take longer, and there was no guarantee they would care about the fate of strangers. "It changes nothing," he finally said. "We cannot pin our hopes on ghosts from the Rim. We must prepare our defense with the forces we have." The council voted to make their stand at Valora. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon would be gathered for one final battle. They knew they would likely lose, but they refused to die running dot as the meeting ended and the council members filed out. Merrick's remained at her console. She stared at the energy readings from Sector 774, her compound eyes reflecting the soft glow of the display. Somewhere out there, something existed. Something powerful enough to hide from the entire galaxy for millennia. She wondered if they were watching. She wondered if they cared dot far from Valora, deep in the cold void beyond the Empire's borders. The Keth Supreme Intelligence processed the latest battle data. It calculated that the Valoran Empire had a 0.3% chance of survival. This was rounded down to 0 for practical purposes. The organic civilizations would be consumed, and their resources would fuel the Keth's expansion to the next target. The Supreme Intelligence did not feel satisfaction at this conclusion. It did not feel anything. It simply calculated and acted. But even as it planned its final assault on Valora, its sensors detected something unusual. At the far edge of the galaxy, where no civilization should exist, there was movement. The Supreme Intelligence noted this as a Meyer anomaly and assigned a 0.001% probability. That it would affect the outcome of the war thought it was wrong. On the outer perimeter of Valaran space, a scout ship drifted silently through the darkness. Captain Merrick's, recently promoted and assigned to early warning duty, watched her sensors with tired eyes. She expected to see nothing. She expected another long shift of staring at empty space. Then her screen lit up. Something was emerging from fold space. Not the Keth. Something else entirely. Her translator struggled to identify the energy signatures, the hull configurations, the weapon systems. Nothing matched any known database. 300 ships materialized before her, their hulls dark and angular, bristling with weapons she had never seen. They were smaller than Valoran vessels, but somehow more dangerous, like predators compressed into efficient killing machines. Her console beeped with an incoming transmission. She opened the channel with trembling claws. A voice spoke. It was not the clicking of insects or the chiming of crystals. It was something entirely new. Something from a world called Earth. "This is Admiral Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Naval Command. We have come to help." Captain Merrick stared at her sensor display, her compound eyes struggling to process what she was seeing. 312 vessels hung in space before her, their angular hulls reflecting the distant starlight. They were unlike anything in the Galactic database. No smooth curves or elegant designs. These ships were built for war, nothing more and nothing less. Her claws trembled as she opened the channel to Valoran High Command. "Admiral Torvax," she transmitted. "We have contact. Unknown fleet, over 300 vessels. They claim to be from a world called Earth. They say they have come to help." The response came back almost immediately. Torvax's voice was sharp with suspicion. "Earth? There is no world by that name in our records. Hold position and do not engage. I am dispatching a diplomatic vessel." Marix acknowledged the order and waited. Around her, the human fleet remained motionless, their weapons powered down in a clear gesture of peace. She noticed that their largest ship, a massive carrier nearly 4 kilometers long, had positioned itself at the front of the formation. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish to put your flagship where the enemy could target it first. Hours passed before the Valoran diplomatic vessel arrived. Ambassador Lyris herself had insisted on coming, her crystalline body sparkling in the artificial light of the shuttle as it approached the human flagship. She was accompanied by a security detail and a team of translators. Though the humans seemed capable of speaking Trade Common already, the shuttle docked with the human carrier, and Lyris stepped into an airlock that smelled of recycled air and metal. A human officer met her there. He was tall for his species, with dark skin and gray hair cut short against his skull. His uniform was simple and practical, displaying few decorations despite what appeared to be a high rank. "Ambassador Lyris," he said, extending his hand in what she had learned was a human greeting. "I am Admiral Daniel Hayes. Welcome aboard the Resolute." Lyris studied him carefully. Humans were a strange species to look at. Soft skin, no natural armor, no claws or fangs. Their eyes faced forward like predators, but their bodies seemed almost fragile. According to Galactic records, their homeworld was classified as a Category 12 death world, meaning it should have been too hostile to produce intelligent life. Yet here they were. "Admiral Hayes," she replied, her voice chiming through her translator. "You must understand our confusion. Your species does not exist in any galactic database." "How is that possible?" Hayes smiled, a strange expression that showed his teeth. Among most species, baring teeth was a threat display. Among humans, it apparently meant friendliness. "That is a long story, Ambassador. Please, come to the conference room. I will explain everything." They walked through the corridors of the Resolute, and Lyris observed everything. The crew members they passed were efficient and disciplined, their movements suggesting extensive military training. The ship itself was spotless, every surface maintained with obvious care. These were not pirates or wanderers. This was a professional Navy dot in the conference room. Hayes activated a holographic display showing a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. "This is Earth," he said. "Our homeworld. 2,000 years ago, by your calendar, Earth was visited by a species we call the Architects. We do not know their true name or where they came from. They examined humanity, found us primitive and violent, and decided we were not ready to join the galactic community." The display showed a shimmering barrier forming around the solar system. They placed a barrier around our star system. It blocked all signals from escaping and prevented any ships from entering or leaving. For 2,000 years, we were alone. We believed we were the only intelligent life in the universe. Lyris leaned forward, fascinated. "How did you survive?" "We almost did not," Hayes admitted. "We fought wars among ourselves. We nearly destroyed our planet with pollution and weapons. But eventually, we learned. We united our nations into a single government. We developed technology that allowed us to clean our world and reach other planets in our system. And 60 years ago, we finally broke through the Architect's barrier." The display showed human ships emerging into open space for the first time. "When we reached the galaxy, we were terrified," Hayes continued. "We knew nothing about who lived out here or whether they would be friendly. So we watched. We built listening posts. We intercepted communications and learned your languages. We studied every species we could find without revealing ourselves. You were spying on us, Lyra said, though her tone held no accusation. We were being careful, Hayes replied. We had been alone for so long that we did not know how to trust others. We built our fleet in secret, preparing for the day when we might need to defend ourselves. Then why reveal yourselves now? Why help us? Hayes paused, and for a moment his calm expression flickered with something deeper. Because we heard your distress signals, Ambassador. We watched the Keth destroy civilization after civilization, and we debated among ourselves about what to do. Some argued that we should stay hidden, let the galaxy burn, and protect only ourselves. He met her eyes directly. But that is not who we wanted to be. Earth was isolated for 2,000 years because others decided we were not worthy of contact. We will not do the same to you. The Keth will eventually come for us anyway, whether we hide or not. So we chose to fight beside you instead of alone. Lyra felt something she had not expected: hope. For weeks, she had begged other civilizations for help, and all had refused. Now these strange creatures from a death world, these soft-skinned beings with no claws or armor, had crossed the galaxy to stand beside strangers. Your fleet is impressive, she said carefully, but the Keth have over 2,000 ships. You have barely 300. Even with our remaining forces, we will be outnumbered by more than 3 to 1. Hayes nodded slowly. We know, but Ambassador, Earth is a harsh world. Our gravity is stronger than most planets. Our weather systems produce storms that can level cities. Our wildlife includes predators that can kill with a single bite. We evolved on a world that tried to murder us every single day. He leaned forward, and his eyes grew hard. We are not fragile, Ambassador. We are survivors. And we do not measure victory by numbers alone. Meanwhile, far across the battlefield of space, the Keth Supreme Intelligence processed new data. Its sensor network had detected the unknown fleet joining the Valoran forces. Analysis of their hull configurations and energy signatures suggested technology that did not match any catalog civilization. The Supreme Intelligence assigned scout vessels to observe the newcomers. Initial reports indicated that their ships were smaller but more heavily armed than expected. Their communication frequencies suggested a species with advanced electronic capabilities. Their formation patterns indicated experienced commanders. The Supreme Intelligence calculated a revised probability of victory, 97.2%. This was still acceptable. The anomaly would be processed along with the Valoran Empire. All organic civilizations eventually fell to the Keth. These newcomers would be no different. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Hayes stood before his command staff. Captain Laura Mitchell, his tactical officer, projected the latest intelligence on the main display. Commander Ryan Torres, his pilot squadron leader, studied the enemy formations with narrowed eyes. The Keth will reach the Karth Nebula in 48 hours, Mitchell reported. That gives us time to establish defensive positions and coordinate with the Valoran fleet. Hayes nodded. What is their doctrine? How do they fight? Efficiently, Torres said. They rely on overwhelming numbers and coordinated attacks. Their weapons are powerful but predictable. They do not adapt well to unexpected tactics because their collective intelligence optimizes for probability rather than creativity. Then we give them something improbable, Hayes said quietly. We make them fight a battle they cannot calculate. He turned to face the viewport, staring out at the stars. Somewhere in that darkness, an enemy was coming that had never known defeat. Somewhere out there, billions of innocent lives waited to see if anyone would save them. Hayes thought of Earth. He thought of his daughter, safe at home, believing her father was on a routine patrol mission. He had not told her the truth. He had not told her that he might not come back, but some things were worth dying for. Some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds said you could not win. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Prepare for combat operations. Tell the Valorans that the line is drawn at Korath. The Keth advance ends there." The fleet began to move. 300 human ships gliding through the void like wolves hunting in the dark. Behind them, the battered Valoran navy formed up, their crews watching the newcomers with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. The galaxy held its breath. The storm was coming. The Korath Nebula stretched across space like a bruise against the stars. Purple and blue gases swirled in patterns that had existed for millions of years, hiding asteroids and debris fields within their glow. It was beautiful and dangerous, the perfect place for an ambush. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Resolute, studying the tactical display. The combined fleet had taken position within the nebula, using the gas clouds to mask their energy signatures. The Valoran ships held the flanks while the human fleet formed the center line. It was the most exposed position, directly in the path of the Keth advance. Admiral Torvax had objected to this arrangement during the planning session. He had argued that the humans should hold the rear, allowing the more experienced Valoran crews to face the enemy first. Hayes had politely refused. "Your ships have already bled for this war," Hayes had told him. "Your crews are exhausted and your vessels are damaged. Let us take the first blow. Save your strength for when we need it most." Torvax had stared at him for a long moment, his compound eyes unreadable. Then he had simply nodded and returned to his flagship. Among his species, actions spoke louder than words. The humans had chosen to stand at the front. That said everything that needed to be said. Now the waiting was almost over. Long-range sensors showed the Keth Armada approaching, a wall of metal and death stretching across the void. 2,400 vessels, including 12 planet-killer dreadnoughts. Each dreadnought was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack continents. Captain Mitchell approached Hayes with a data tablet. "Final readiness reports, Admiral. All ships confirm weapons and shields at full capacity. Fighter squadrons are standing by. And the special packages?" Hayes asked quietly. Mitchell allowed herself a small smile. "Loaded and ready. The Keth will not know what hit them." Hayes nodded and turned to face his bridge crew. They were young, most of them. Young and scared and far from home. But they stood at their stations with steady hands and clear eyes. They knew why they were here. They knew what was at stake. "Open a channel to all ships," Hayes ordered. The communications officer complied. And Hayes spoke to his fleet for what might be the last time. "This is Admiral Hayes. In a few hours, we will engage an enemy that has never known defeat. They have destroyed 40 civilizations. They have killed billions. They believe they cannot be stopped." He paused, letting his words sink in. "They are wrong. We are humanity. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that would have broken any other species. We did not just survive. We thrived. We built cities and empires and reached for the stars." His voice hardened. "The Keth think we are soft because we have no claws. They think we are weak because we feel compassion. They think they can calculate our defeat with their cold machine logic. But they have never faced an enemy like us. They have never fought a species that refuses to accept the impossible." He raised his fist, a gesture that cameras broadcast to every ship in the fleet. "Today, we show the galaxy what humanity can do. Today, we fight for people we have never met, on worlds we have never seen. Today, we draw a line in the stars and tell the Keth that they shall not pass. For Earth, for Valora, for every species that deserves a tomorrow." The channel closed, and for a moment there was silence on the bridge. Then the crew began to cheer, their voices rising in a roar that echoed through the corridors of the Resolute. Across the fleet, similar cheers erupted on every ship, aboard the Valoran flagship, Admiral Torvax listened to the human speech through his translator. He did not fully understand the words, but he understood the spirit behind them. These creatures were not afraid of death. They were afraid of failure. They were afraid of letting others down. It was the most terrifying and inspiring thing he had ever witnessed. The Keth Armada entered the nebula at exactly the predicted time. The Supreme Intelligence had calculated the optimal approach vector, accounting for debris fields and gravitational anomalies. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Then the first missiles struck. They came from nowhere, launched from hidden positions within the gas clouds. Human stealth bombers, painted black and running silent, had crept into position hours before the battle. They unleashed their payloads and vanished back into the nebula before the Keth could react. The missiles themselves were not explosive. They were carriers, each one releasing thousands of tiny drones that attached to Keth hulls. The drones began broadcasting false signals, corrupting sensor data and creating phantom targets that confused the enemy fleet. The Supreme Intelligence registered the attack and began countermeasures. But the confusion bought precious seconds, and seconds were all the humans needed. The main fleet emerged from the nebula like a blade drawn from its sheath. Human ships accelerated to attack speed, their engines burning bright against the purple gas. At the head of the formation, the Resolute led the charge, her main guns already tracking targets. "All batteries open fire," Hayes commanded. The space between the fleets erupted with light. Human rail cannons hurled projectiles at near-light speed, each impact releasing enough energy to vaporize steel. Plasma lances cut through Keth armor like hot knives. Missile swarms filled the void, their warheads seeking targets with relentless precision. The Keth returned fire, their weapons equally devastating. Human ships began taking hits, shields flaring under the assault. A destroyer on the left flank exploded, her reactor breaching under concentrated fire. A cruiser lost her engines and drifted, helpless, until a Keth vessel finished her off. But the humans did not break. They did not flee. They pressed forward, driving into the enemy formation like a spear into a wound. Commander Torres led the fighter squadrons into the chaos. His pilots were the best Earth had trained, flying machines that could outmaneuver anything the Keth possessed. They wove through the crossfire, targeting enemy weapon systems and sensor arrays. "All wings, focus on the dreadnoughts," Torres ordered. "Aim for the thermal exhaust ports along the dorsal ridge. Intelligence says those are their weak points." Lieutenant Commander Kevin Park acknowledged and led his squadron toward the nearest dreadnought. It was massive, a mountain of metal bristling with guns that tracked his tiny fighter with lethal intent. Defensive fire filled the space around him, and he watched two of his wingmen disappear in flashes of light, but he did not turn back. He lined up his shot, waited until he was almost too close to survive, and fired. His missiles struck the exhaust port and detonated inside the dreadnought's reactor cooling system. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire rear section of the dreadnought exploded, a chain reaction that tore the massive vessel in half. Park pulled away as debris scattered across his flight path, his heart pounding but his hands steady. One down, 11 to go. The battle raged across thousands of kilometers, a storm of fire and death that made previous conflicts look like skirmishes. The Supreme Intelligence processed the combat data and calculated that the humans were taking losses faster than expected. At this rate, they would be destroyed within 2 hours. But something was wrong with the calculation. Human ships that should have retreated after taking critical damage instead accelerated toward enemy vessels. Captains who should have surrendered instead rammed their dying ships into Keth formations. Crews who should have abandoned their posts instead fought until their last breath. The Supreme Intelligence could not understand it. These tactics were inefficient. They maximized damage to the enemy, but also guaranteed death for the attacker. No rational species would choose such methods, but humanity had never been rational. They had always been stubborn and brave and gloriously, terrifyingly mad. On the Resolute, Hayes watched the battle unfold on his display. They were winning, barely, but the cost was terrible. Dozens of human ships were gone. Thousands of his people were dead. And the battle was far from over. "Admiral," Mitchell said quietly, "the Keth are regrouping. They are concentrating their dreadnoughts for a coordinated strike on our sender." Hayes nodded slowly. This was the moment. If they could break the dreadnought formation, the Keth fleet would lose its backbone. If they failed, everything would be lost. "Signal Commander West," he ordered. "Tell him it is time for the flanking maneuver." Mitchell hesitated. "Sir, that maneuver has a 70% casualty projection. The battleship group will be torn apart." Hayes closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and met her gaze. "I know. Send the signal." The message went out, and Commander Nathan West received it aboard the battleship Defiance. He read the orders, understood what they meant, and smiled grimly. "All hands," he announced to his crew. "Prepare for glory." The battleship group broke formation and accelerated toward the Keth dreadnoughts, directly into the teeth of their defensive fire. It was suicide by any reasonable calculation. It was exactly what the Keth could not predict, and it was going to change everything. Commander Nathan West watched the Keth dreadnoughts grow larger on his view screen. The enemy vessels had formed a tight formation, their combined firepower creating a wall of death that no sane commander would approach. The Supreme Intelligence had calculated that any attack on this position would result in total destruction for the attacker. West was counting on that calculation. "All ships, maintain acceleration," he ordered. "Do not deviate from attack vector." The battleship Defiance shuddered as enemy fire struck her shields. Warning lights flashed across the bridge, and damage reports flooded in from every section. West ignored them all. He had eyes only for the dreadnoughts ahead. Behind him, 19 other battleships followed in tight formation. They were the pride of Earth's Navy, each one crewed by veterans who had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not return. Now they charged into hell with their guns blazing and their hearts unafraid. The Keth defensive fire intensified. 2 battleships exploded within seconds of each other, their reactors breaching under the concentrated assault. A third lost her engines and drifted, still firing her weapons even as she burned. A fourth took a direct hit to her bridge, killing her captain and senior officers, but the surviving crew kept fighting. West felt each loss like a knife in his chest. These were his people, his friends. His family died, but he could not stop. He could not turn back. The mission was bigger than any of them. "Weapons range in 30 seconds, his tactical officer reported. "Lock all forward batteries on the lead dreadnought," West commanded. "Fire on my mark." The Defiance crossed the final distance, her hull glowing red from the heat of enemy fire. Around her, the surviving battleships spread into an attack formation, each one targeting a different dreadnought. The Keth Supreme Intelligence registered their approach and calculated an interception. But the calculation was based on rational behavior. It assumed the humans would try to survive. They did not. "Fire everything," West ordered. The battleship group unleashed their full arsenal in a single devastating volley. Rail cannons, plasma lances, nuclear missiles, everything they had. The combined firepower struck the Keth dreadnoughts before their shields could fully compensate, punching through armor and detonating deep within their structures. 3 dreadnoughts died in the first volley. 2 more took critical damage and began to drift. The formation that had seemed invincible moments before now had gaping holes that the rest of the human fleet could exploit, but the price was terrible. Of the 20 battleships that had begun the attack, only 7 survived the enemy counterfire. The Defiance herself was crippled, her engines destroyed and her weapons offline. Commander West lay on the deck of his shattered bridge, blood running from a wound on his forehead. Surrounded by the bodies of his crew, he looked at the view screen, still somehow functioning, and saw the dreadnoughts burning. He smiled through the pain. "Got you," he whispered Dodd across the battlefield. Admiral Hayes saw the results of the flanking maneuver. The Keth formation was broken. Their dreadnoughts were in chaos. Now was the time to strike. "All ships, advance," he ordered. "Push through the gap. Do not let them regroup." The human fleet surged forward, pouring through the holes that West's sacrifice had created. The Lauren ships followed close behind, their guns adding to the storm of fire that tore into the Keth from every direction. The Supreme Intelligence attempted to restore order to its fleet. It issued commands to reform the defensive perimeter, to concentrate fire on the enemy flagship, to eliminate the greatest threats first. But something was interfering with its communications. Its ships were not responding as quickly as they should. There were delays measured in seconds, tiny gaps that were creating massive problems. Chief Technician Derek Cole grinned at his console aboard the Resolute. His electronic warfare team had been working on this virus for months, studying Keth communication protocols and finding weaknesses that no one else had noticed. They had uploaded the code during the opening moments of the battle, hiding it within the false signals generated by the drone swarms. Now it was paying off. The virus did not destroy the Keth network. That would have been too obvious, too easy to counter. Instead, it introduced small delays into every command, fractions of a second that the Supreme Intelligence could not account for. In a battle where timing meant everything, those fractions of a second were fatal. "The enemy is fragmenting," Mitchell reported. "Individual ships are acting without coordination. Their efficiency is dropping by the minute." Hayes nodded. "Press the attack. Show no mercy." The battle became a massacre. Human ships hunted Keth vessels through the nebula, their superior tactics overwhelming enemies that could no longer fight as a collective. The Lauren crews, inspired by the human example, pushed forward with renewed courage. Ships that had expected to die defending their homeworld now found themselves winning. On the bridge of her destroyer, the Valor, Captain Amy Chun watched a Keth cruiser bearing down on a Valoran medical frigate. The medical ship had no weapons, no defenses. It was loaded with wounded from the early stages of the battle, helpless victims who would be slaughtered if she did not act. The Valor was badly damaged. Her shields were gone, her weapons were reduced to half capacity, and her engines were running on emergency power. By any reasonable measure, she should withdraw and save her crew. Amy Chun had never been reasonable. "Helm, intercept course," she ordered. "Put us between that cruiser and the medical ship." Her first officer looked at her with wide eyes. "Captain, we cannot survive that engagement." "I know," Chun said quietly. "Sound the evacuation alarm. All hands to escape pods. I will handle the rest." The crew hesitated for only a moment. Then they moved, trusting their captain, even as they fled her ship. Within minutes, the Valor was empty except for Chun herself, standing alone on the bridge as her destroyer accelerated toward the enemy. The Keth cruiser opened fire. Chun felt the impacts through the deck, each one shaking the ship a little harder than the last. Warning lights turned red, then failed entirely as systems overloaded. The air grew hot with the smell of burning circuits, but she held course. She held course until the very last second. Then she rammed the Valor directly into the Keth cruiser's midsection. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the nebula. The medical frigate, saved by her sacrifice, jumped to safety with its cargo of wounded. Chun's escape pods were recovered hours later. Her crew alive because she had given them time to flee. Amy Chun died alone on a bridge full of fire. And she died smiling. The Supreme Intelligence watched its fleet crumble and experienced something it had never felt before: confusion. Its calculations had predicted victory with 97.2% certainty. Now those calculations were meaningless. The humans did not fight according to any model it understood. They did not retreat when outmatched. They did not surrender when defeated. They simply kept attacking until they won or died. For the first time in its existence, the Supreme Intelligence considered retreat. But human foaljammers had been activated throughout the nebula, blocking any escape route. The Keth were trapped in a killing ground of their own making. One by one, the dreadnoughts fell. Destroyed by missile swarms, crippled by rail cannon fire, or simply overwhelmed by enemies that refused to stop coming. The Supreme Intelligence felt its network shrinking, connections dropping away as ships were lost. Finally, only one vessel remained. A single command ship, surrounded by the burning wreckage of the greatest armada the Keth had ever assembled. The Supreme Intelligence directed this last ship to approach the human flagship. "Unknown fleet," it broadcast. "You have achieved an improbable victory." Query: why did you interfere? This conflict was not your concern. Your species was not threatened. Your actions were inefficient for your own survival. On the Resolute, Admiral Hayes listened to the question. Around him, his bridge crew stood in exhausted silence. They had lost 94 ships and over 40,000 people. The cost of victory was written in blood across the stars, but they had won. Against all odds, they had won. Hayes opened a channel to respond. He thought about all the species the Keth had destroyed. He thought about the Valorans who had begged for help and been refused by everyone except Earth. He thought about his daughter at home. Safe because someone had chosen to fight. Because someone had to, he said simply. Because you would have come for us eventually, and we preferred to meet you on our terms rather than yours. Because every species deserves a chance to see tomorrow, even the ones we have never met. He paused, then added quietly, and because that is who we are. The Supreme Intelligence processed this response. It did not compute. It did not fit any model of rational behavior. These humans had sacrificed thousands of their own people to protect strangers. They had risked extinction for nothing more than an idea. Illogical, the Supreme Intelligence concluded. Yes, Hayes agreed. It is. That is what makes us human. He nodded to his weapons officer. Fire. The last Keth ship vanished in a flash of light, and the battle was over. The silence after the battle was almost worse than the noise. Admiral Hayes stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, staring out at the field of debris that stretched across the Korath Nebula. Broken hulls drifted through the gas clouds, some still burning with fires that would take days to die. Human ships mixed with Keth wreckage, impossible to tell apart in the chaos of destruction. 94 ships, 42,000 crew members. Mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, all of them gone. Hayes had memorized every name on the casualty list. He would carry those names with him for the rest of his life. That was the burden of command. That was the price of victory. Captain Mitchell approached him quietly. Admiral, the Valoran High Council requests your presence on Valora. They wish to honor the fleet and discuss the future. Hayes nodded without turning around. Tell them I will come. But first, we gather our dead. Every escape pod, every body we can find. No one gets left behind. Mitchell saluted and withdrew. Hayes remained at the viewport, watching the stars spin slowly past as the Resolute maintained her station. The search and rescue operation took 3 days. Human ships combed through the debris field, recovering survivors from damaged vessels and collecting the remains of those who had not survived. The Valorans helped where they could, their crews, working alongside humans despite the language barriers and cultural differences. Commander Nathan West was found alive in the wreckage of the Defiance, barely breathing but still conscious when the rescue team reached him. He had lost his right arm and suffered severe burns across half his body, but he smiled when they told him about the victory. "Worth it," he whispered before passing out. Captain Amy Chun's body was never recovered. The explosion that destroyed the Valor and the Keth cruiser had been too complete. But her crew survivors requested that her name be placed at the top of the memorial list. She had saved them all. She deserved to be remembered first. When the fleet finally jumped to Valora, they were met by a sight that took Hayes' breath away. Thousands of civilian vessels surrounded the planet, their running lights blinking in. Synchronized patterns that spelled out a single word: thank you. The Valoran High Council chamber was full when Hayes arrived, still wearing his battle-worn uniform. He had refused to change, refused to clean the soot and blood from his clothes. He wanted them to see what the victory had cost. Every councilor rose as he entered. Admiral Torvax stood at the front, his insectoid form somehow managing to convey deep respect through body language alone. Ambassador Lyris glowed with an inner light that she had not shown since the crisis began. Admiral Daniel Hayes, Torvax, announced, on behalf of the Valoran Galactic Empire and all 12 species we represent, I offer you our eternal gratitude. You came to us as strangers, and you leave as the greatest friends we have ever known. Hayes inclined his head. We did what anyone should have done, Admiral. We saw people in need, and we helped. No, Lyris interrupted gently. You did what no one else would do. We begged every neighboring power for assistance. All refused. They calculated the odds and decided we were not worth saving. You calculated the same odds and chose to fight anyway. She stepped forward, her crystalline form casting rainbows across the chamber floor. Tell me, Admiral, why? Why risk everything for people you had never met? Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a small photograph, worn at the edges from constant handling. It showed a young girl with dark hair and a gap-toothed smile, standing in a garden on a world very far away. This is my daughter, he said. Her name is Sophie. She is 7 years old. When I left Earth, she asked me why I had to go. I told her that sometimes people need help, and if nobody helps them, bad things happen. He showed the photograph to Lyris, letting her see the child's innocent face. Sophie asked me why we should help people we do not know. I told her that everyone deserves a chance to grow up safe and happy. Everyone deserves a tomorrow. And if we have the power to give someone that chance, we have the responsibility to try. His voice grew thick with emotion. I fought for Valora because I want Sophie to grow up in a galaxy where people help each other. I want her to know that when things are at their worst, someone will come. Someone will care. Lyris studied the photograph for a long moment. Then she looked up at Hayes with something like wonder in her crystalline eyes. You are a remarkable species, she said softly. The Council offered humanity everything they could imagine. Territory on the richest worlds. Access to technology centuries ahead of Earth's. Political power within the Empire. Seats on the High Council itself. Hayes declined it all. We do not want conquest, he explained. We do not want tribute. We want only what we have always wanted since we broke through the barrier. Friendship. Trade. A place in the galactic community where we can learn from you and share what we have learned ourselves. The councilors looked at each other in confusion. No species had ever refused power when it was offered freely. The concept was almost incomprehensible. You saved our civilization, Councilor Veth said slowly. And you asked for nothing but friendship? Hayes smiled. Friendship is not nothing. It is everything. Earth was alone for 2,000 years because others decided we were not worthy of contact. We learned what isolation does to a species. We learned how fear breeds cruelty, and cruelty breeds more fear. We refused to start that cycle again. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every counselor in turn. We want allies, not subjects. Partners, not servants. If we had wanted to conquer the galaxy, we would have done it while you were distracted by the Keth. We did not. We want to build something better than conquest. We want to build a future. 1 year later, Earth was formally welcomed into the Galactic Council. The ceremony was held on Valora, in the same chamber where Hayes had addressed a High Council after the battle. Representatives from every species attended, and for the first time in galactic history, a Deathworld civilization was granted equal status with the elder races. Admiral Hayes, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of the Combined Defense Forces, sat beside Admiral Torvax. The two warriors had become unlikely friends in the months since the battle, sharing stories and strategies across species boundaries that had once seemed impossible to cross. "I still do not understand humans," Torvax admitted quietly as the ceremony proceeded. "You are soft and slow and fragile. You should not have survived on your death world, let alone cross the stars to save us." Hayes chuckled. "We are stubborn, Admiral. That is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. We never know when to give up." "It is maddening," Torvax agreed. "And wonderful." But wonderful. On Earth, a memorial was built to honor the fallen of the Korath Nebula. It stood on a hillside overlooking the ocean, a simple stone wall inscribed with 42,000 names. At the top of the list was Captain Amy Chundot. At the base of the wall, a single inscription was carved in 100 languages, human and alien alike. They answered the call. They held the line. They gave tomorrow to those who had none. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see the memorial. Valorans and humans stood side by side, reading the names of the dead and remembering their sacrifice. Children asked their parents what had happened here, and parents tried to explain what courage meant. Sophie Hayes visited the memorial with her father on the anniversary of the battle. She was 8 years old now, old enough to understand a little of what had happened. She held her father's hand and looked up at the wall of names. "Were you scared?" she asked. Hayes knelt down to look his daughter in the eye. "Yes," he admitted. "I was very scared. But I remembered what you asked me before I left. You asked why we should help people we do not know." Sophie nodded, remembering. "I found the answer out there," Hayes said. "We help people we do not know because someday we might be the ones who need help. And when that day comes, I hope someone will be brave enough to answer our call." Sophie thought about this for a long moment. Then she hugged her father tightly. "I am glad you came home," she whispered. Hayes held his daughter close, surrounded by the names of those who had not come home, and he made a silent promise to them all. Their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Their courage would not be wasted. Earth would build the future they had died for. A galaxy of strangers had become a galaxy of friends. And it had all started because someone chose to help. The stars above. The memorial glittered in the evening sky, each one a sun with worlds orbiting around it. Worlds full of life, full of hope, full of tomorrows. Humanity had given them that. And humanity would protect it, no matter the cost. That was what it meant to be human. That was why they had answered the call. And that was why the galaxy would never underestimate them again.